Welcome to the Great Beer State podcast from the Michigan Brewers Guild. The Great Beer State is a weekly show sharing conversations and stories from the passionate people who contribute to our vibrant Michigan beer community. It is made up of a mix between full-length archived interviews from the Guild's first documentary book project, A Rising Tide, Stories from the Michigan Brewers Guild, and conversations recorded in the here and now. Each episode is kicked off with a conversational update from host Scott Graham, Executive Director of the Guild, and the Brewangelist Fred Biltman, author of A Rising Tide. Here's Scott and Fred. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State podcast. My name's Fred. I'm here with my good friend Scott Graham, Executive Director for the Michigan Brewers Guild. Scott, welcome to episode 20-something. I think we're 27.
26 or 27. 27. I think you are correct. But yeah, thanks and welcome to you.
Thank you. So today we'll give some brief updates and then we'll get into our Brewers Dozen, our tradition of regional shout outs to member breweries on our second lap here. And then we're talking to our old friend Pat Scanlon in an interview recorded at Jolly Pumpkin Dexter back in 2018 as part of the Rising Tide Project. A fun conversation with a great old pal. So
yeah, I really enjoyed re-listening to the interview, but won't get sidetracked on that yet.
Yeah, so we're recording a little bit ahead of air date here, so we won't be up to the minute with whatever COVID-related news is out there, but we are heading into the cooler months in fall and winter. And last episode, we talked about some of the changes for our brewery members with tasting rooms. And I don't know if there's new news for you, Scott, other than encouraging people to continue to support and shift into, in some cases, more of a to-go model.
Yeah, I don't think there's new news. I know I'm hearing anecdotally about confusion with some of the new requirements to collect names and phone numbers, and there's some grumbling about that too. I get both sides of the issue. I know I've heard recently of a few restaurants closing. I think it sounds like temporarily, and these aren't our brewery members, but just in conversations. It's a hard time out there, and it's we're seeing COVID cases on the rise. It's certainly concerning. It's affecting everybody. It's different in different regions, but it certainly is something that's on everybody's mind still.
Yeah, so, a strange thing that I don't think we could have ever imagined this would be part of our update, a regular update protocol on a podcast about breweries, but it is. We want everybody to stay safe, stay supportive, and do what they can so we can all get through this together. And heading into winter, it's especially important to kind of, refresh and update and prepare for a different type of engagement than we had over the summer with all the outdoor seating.
Yeah. Hopefully we see things start to change pattern here. There was just the announcement of a likely vaccine, which again, I think causes some optimism, some concern, some confusion, but hopefully we get to where we can get back to being a little bit more normal society.
Yep. And also, sometime around this air date, I would expect that we're going to have an announcement about the Michigan Brewers Guild Master Brewers Great Lakes Hop and Barley, soon to be named collaborative virtual education event that's in place of our winter conference. So that'll be happening in January, but we'll be announcing any day probably as you listen to this episode.
Yeah, and it's a fun event. It's normally probably too much for somebody to try and take in who's not really connected to the industry. We don't market it to folks outside the industry, although anybody is welcome. But it could have some interest to somebody who is just sort of follows the industry casually. They may want to check it out. So it does offer a unique opportunity for that, I think, in the 2021 event in January.
Yeah, so check that out. Details will be forthcoming shortly. Seems like a good time to jump into our Brewers Dozen. And you've selected a group of breweries in the Bay City, Saginaw area this week.
Yeah, we've kind of shifted to a regional focus, and I took a look at the Saginaw Bay and Thumb area, and started in Bay City with Tri-City Brewing Company right there, kind of in the heart of the Saginaw Bay.
And next up, we've got Oracle Brewing Company in downtown Saginaw.
Yeah, one of 3 breweries in the Saginaw area. If you go a little west of downtown, you get into, I guess it's sort of a residential neighborhood. It's a quiet area, but Loggers Brewing Company, a little west of downtown.
And if you've read A Rising Tide or listened to any of, especially the archived interviews from that project, you've heard tales of Saginaw because it's where the first gathering happened at Hamilton Street Pub that then became the Michigan Brewers Guild. So we're historically tied to Saginaw. It's great to see a little community brewers there now. Next up, we've got the Maple Grill a little further west.
Yeah, I don't think it's a Saginaw address. I can't remember the name of the town. Please forgive me, but those 3 places in Saginaw are all very different from each other, which is something that I think's fun about visiting breweries, is that they can be so different. In nearby Saginaw, in Midland, you have Midland Brewing Company.
And the Maple Grill is in Hemlock, Michigan. So that's
thank you.
That's our update there. And then we move over to Frankenmuth, and we've got Frankenmuth Brewery, another historic brewery in terms of origin story here, the Michigan brewing scene.
Yeah, Frankenmuth is, it's in a later incarnation, but it's nice that there's still a brewing tradition being upheld in Frankenmuth. And I suppose I'll backtrack. Also in Midland, one of our newer members that I neglected to note is MI Element, Grains and Grounds, which is, we did just mention them in breweries that have opened this year, and they're more downtown Midland. You mentioned Frankenmuth Brewery, and if we pop out to West Branch, which, when I think about the map, maybe West Branch doesn't fit perfectly in the Saginaw Bay area, but hey, the Highway Brewing Company in West Branch is a brew pub operation, real nice place, right off I-75, the highway in West Branch.
And then you've got Wiltsey's Brew Pub in Oscoda.
Yeah, that's one of the early brew pubs, and just south of there, along the lake shore in Tawa City, you have the Boathouse Beer Company and Boozery, which is also a brew pub operation.
Any place that calls itself a boozery has me interested. But next we'll head over to Caseville and give a shout out to the Thumb Brewery.
Yeah, and we're in the Thumb proper now. If you go a little bit south in the Thumb, you have Elk Street Brewery in Sandusky.
And then we'll wrap up this week's Brewers Dozen with Lexington Brewing Company in Lexington. So that's our Brewers.
So if anybody gets to the Thumb area or thinking of going to the Thumb area, there can be a multi-day brewery tour, or I'm sure you could fashion one day over there and have a great time.
Which again is one of those remarkable things. It's just cool to see such a diverse, robust collection of breweries in a region that certainly was later to the game of craft beer than the other more dense parts of the state. So it's really cool to see creativity and brewing and hospitality alive and well in the Thumb. So with that, we'll transition into introducing our guest, Pat Scanlon. He was around in the very early days. His story like all of them, is unique. His introduction, coming through a family member asking him to help out with a brew on premise, which was sort of a brand new take on what could be done. What'd you think of listening to our chat with Pat?
Well, it was fun. Like a lot of these interviews, it kind of takes me back. But one thing that stood out is, Pat and I will still talk semi-regularly, and he still likes to call with ideas about things that the guild should be doing, or what is this or what is that. And some of the things he was mentioning, this interview was recorded a couple years ago, actually came to pass in the past couple of years. So Pat's kind of a visionary, I guess. He was there at the beginning, and he's still got enthusiasm for the industry today. Interestingly enough, he's working at Motor City Brewing Works now, which is fun to have him back directly engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. At the time of the interview, he was out of the industry doing some other projects, and it's great to have him back. He'll also share the story of Sandy Harville, who recruited him to Detroit Brew Factory. And, Sandy Harville was a great help to us, and he kind of shares that story in the conversation, but she passed away a number of years ago. So, but it was great to hear that story and touch base and think about Sandy. And that was just another gem, a part of this interview that I enjoyed.
Yeah, Sandy was one of those people that was sort of behind the scenes, but for a few years she helped the Brewers Guild get its act together, and had this kind of landmark place. At least it was unique in its time and place. East Point was the locale in the Metro Detroit area, and they had their little brew on premise operation, which has kind of been unique to the state. There have been a few. There's one surviving. I don't know if the tradition still carries on in Canada, but I think it may be stronger there. But yeah, Detroit Brew Factory is, a fun part of that story.
Yep. And Pat was a big part of getting the festivals going. We talked to John Lenardos, who was, they were sort of different parts of that puzzle. And so it really does send you back to those times, and you wonder how in the world did we manage to survive our ambitions, because we just pieced it together and figured it out. And Pat was always a willing participant to hang in there in the most challenging of times. And we'll save the story.
And like we said, he's a creative problem solver, so that role fit him well. And he certainly, if you've been to the Summer Beer Festival and enjoyed it, part of how we got there, part of the story, you have to mention Patrick Scanlon.
Absolutely. And I'll save the one of the closing stories in here for Pat to share. But this is another one of those episodes where cautionary tale, there's some revelry in telling some old stories. It has colorful language. We'll check the explicit box, and hope you enjoy it. And there's your disclaimer. So we'll head over to Dexter and hand you off to the conversation with our good friend Pat Scanlon from 2018. Here's Pat.
Cheers to Pat.
Cheers.
Pat, we're just kind of telling old stories about, brewing beer in Michigan and the community that came out of it. Can you start? Just tell me how you came to be involved in the beer brewing community.
I think it probably would have been 1995. I was working at the Children's Home of Detroit. My specialty was in therapeutic physical intervention with young men, so my job was to secure young people before they'd hurt themselves or others or destroy property. I got a call from my Aunt Sandy Harville, who everyone knows and has been, Fred, you said you've interviewed her. Well, people have spoke about her in the interviews. She called and asked me if I would like to be the brewer and the head winemaker at Detroit Brew Factory, which I, of course, said yes to right away. And I had no idea how to make beer. So I bought Charlie Papazian's book on how to brew, and I slapped together all this equipment we had, and I started making beer pretty quickly after that, maybe 3 or 4 weeks after she had contacted me.
And what year is that, do you reckon?
That would have had to have been 95. Drew's Place opened in 96, I think. So that would have been fall of 95.
All right.
And that would have been, as far as I know, the first brewery in Michigan that had a wine license as well.
Yeah.
At the time. So it was a learning process from day one. And the only reason I really was able to keep brewing and succeed at something was because of Tom Mariozzi and Scott King. Not knowing how to brew or anything about it, I just called Tom and I called Scott. I actually looked him up. There was no Google at the time, good heavens. I didn't even have a cell phone. So I think I just looked in the yellow pages and found a couple of breweries that were open, and then it kind of went from there.
Where was Tom?
Tom was at Waterblock.
Oh, yeah. I didn't
Mariozzi.
recognize the last name, but yeah. I know
Big Tom was at Atwater.
Oh, yeah.
And all he knew, and being from Germany, all he knew was I was a brewmaster too. And he assumed I'd probably been to all the brewing college at universities.
This brewmaster knows very
Oh,
little.
yes. But I knew at that point right away, he thought of me as his brother.
Oh, yeah.
From day one. I mean, he came over like that day. I called in his boots and his whole red regalia, the brewing outfit. And I was kind of off from there. He just never stopped talking to me about beer and how do we make beer and how we package beer and how being a brewer, you're probably one of the coolest dudes ever. Because it's in Germany, he would tell me it's
the hook was set.
Yeah, I guess that was probably it. You know what I mean?
I thought this was going to be cool.
Wow, man.
I didn't know it was going to be this cool.
None of that really panned out, which is the reasons I thought it were going to be cool because, good heavens, learning, making the beer at that time was actually the fun part of it. At the time, I was making coconut Hefeweizen, curry, whatever. I was making those kind of beers then because the layout on my brewery was 5 15-gallon brew kettles and one barrel. So I was experimenting pretty heavily back in the old days, but I would always go back to old traditional style and traditional beer methods.
And can you share maybe what Sandy brought to you in terms of what was the motivation behind opening that and she was so helpful to us and so unfortunate that she passed, but can you share maybe what she shared with you in terms of what was that adventure all about?
Well, Sandy was also my aunt and she was my godmother. So she used to go to Canada right over the Canadian bridge, and they had something, and they probably still have now, they're called BOPs, a brew on premise. And they've been doing that in Canada forever. They'd make an ale out of those kettles we had with dried malt extract or liquid extract and dried yeast. And she went over there and she partook in the wine part of it. They had a wine license as well. So she loved her wine. I mean, she was one of the very few women brewery owners and probably one of the first, I would say.
I believe she was the first.
Yeah, no, she wasn't a big beer, she didn't drink beer at all. But the concept she was at, she thought it was brilliant to go there and make your own beer or wine and then go back and bottle it and drink it while you're bottling and just have fun. More like a camaraderie thing. And she didn't look at it as, once she got into it, she didn't think it was like a brewery or you need a brewery license.
Yeah.
She looked at it more, she thought it was like an arts and craft at the time, which ended pretty quickly.
Right, you came in at a time that was, 2.5 years after the law changed. Was it a response to that opportunity, or was it just good timing that she came in with an idea and it had just recently become legal for her to execute that idea?
No, I came into it because she was my godmother and she was basically asking me for a favor.
Right. But was her timing just related to her getting inspired in Canada and saying, let's do this? Yeah. And it happened to be legal?
Yeah, I had no idea.
Which 2 years prior would have not been able to happen?
Yeah, no idea. Had no idea. Didn't know anything from Bell's, from Paw Winery, just knew nothing. She knew she enjoyed going there with my mom and her sisters and friends, making beer and wine and drinking it and bringing it home and having fun.
Did she have a business prior to that?
She was the executive assistant, I guess you'd call it, but she had an integral part in a tap and tool company for years and years in Detroit.
So this was that twilight sort of career?
Yeah, she did very well, and she retired well before retirement age. I want to say Sandy was probably about 55 when we met her, about my age now maybe, possibly, yeah. And, she just wanted to have fun. She wanted her own business. I mean, it's pretty evident she was good with the money because how she kept DBF in business all those years was amazing because at the time we weren't, although breweries are what they are now, and I don't, oh, look at that guy. He's, all right, he's making me feel more comfortable.
Well, not me. That makes one of us.
You better let the bar staff know not to serve that guy. Oh, what were you saying about? I'm sorry, Fred. About
Well, we were just talking about Sandy's start and that she was early retired and starting another
she
sort
wanted
of
to have fun
retirement career, and
right.
So let's just find that really.
And I think it was
interesting.
a money issue. You know, like you said, like breweries now today, and I don't know if anyone's making money, but maybe they get loans. But for a while there, when we were breweries, I think we came together as a guild because we were just a lot of people. For the most part, I would say all of us, except for maybe one, were kind of struggling. You know, everyone was trying to figure out how to do this and how to get better and how do we package beer and send it somewhere and so it doesn't blow up, and how do you buy labelers? This was way before all that, right?
Yeah. And so, and circling back to Detroit Brew Factory for a minute, you had a parallel process in meaning, so, and I'm paraphrasing because I know where the system is now, but so customers were able to come in and kind of bring a party in and make their own beer, but then you were also making beer for the taps. So you had house beer brewed by you, and then people could make their own beer on the system.
When we started, it was just malt extract and another sugar added, corn sugar, dextrose, and dried yeast. And I would actually got a book and I would follow that recipe for a couple weeks. And then I turned myself into a brewer by calling Tom and Scott, and experimenting and learning styles. Eventually, I had the guys from Pico, Mike O'Brien, I had the Pico guys way back then. I knew they were building small homebrew systems. So somehow I searched out a 55-gallon stainless steel drum from Bic pens, and those guys retrofitted it for me and made a mash tun for me. And then it was kind of off from there. I started making all my beers were no longer extract beers. I was making mash and sending it to those kettles and wait for the guests to come in. The guest would choose specialty grains, maybe for color or whatnot. Depending on the gravity, maybe we'd add some amount of malt extract. But the recipes became more and more. And out of the one barrel, of course, I had a 1-barrel brew kettle. I started doing 1 barrel at a time. And then what had happened is we also figured out at the same time the cash flow was hard. And we were like, I think we're allowed to sell beer in here. Once we started reading the rules. So sure enough, I put some taps through the cooler, and then all of a sudden we started selling beer. We had a little bit of cash flow, and then of course I wanted to, people I had met, people started to following like the beer, like all breweries. Maybe people at the time were only drinking Bud Light, but what they really wanted was what a brewery is. It's like olfactory. I mean, my favorite beer isn't because of the way the beer tastes, it's because who I had it with and where it felt good, and if I have a story to go with it.
Yeah.
Well, their story was my Aunt Sandy. Those people, the guests were my Sandy and myself, and I was pretty humble. I told them I didn't know what they were doing. A lot of those guests were home brewers, and they told me a lot. So, a lot of that kind of grew out of that, and we started making money. And I wanted to sell this beer, and people wanted. And then I found out the whole nother world of 3-tier distribution at the time in Michigan. How can I get that beer to the guy across the street? I mean, I'm looking at his bar. It's right there, and I can't get that beer there. I couldn't get it there until someone took a chance on me. So
I know Sandy was on the board and very helpful and involved in the guild early on, and you were also involved. What was your first awareness? Was it there? And then we'll get into kind of what your next steps were.
My first awareness of the guild?
Yeah.
Now, I know there's a lot of stories of how the guild have started, right? Everyone started the guild. I remember in my mind, it's foggy, but I had got a hold of Tom Marios and I had created quite a friendship as two brewers in the Detroit area. He wanted to have a Stomptisch, which he explained to me was brewers come together and have breakfast and talk about the business and then talk about their families, and like a brewers meeting. Maybe like, I don't know, I almost thought in some way like a union meeting of some kind. So yes, we decided to do that, and we called, I don't know how many breweries there were at the time, 8, 10, 12, maybe, I don't know how many there were.
About 30.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking further on, correct.
Oh.
Yeah, no, you're right, I'm thinking how many. So it was our opinion, we called the date for that Stomptisch, and Rex was involved in it, and a couple other people, and I believe Larry Bell wanted to have it at a more central location.
Uh-huh.
I believe it turned more into a possible guild than it was intentionally to have breakfast. That is my recollection. So we're like, yeah, we'll go up to wherever that was, Saginaw or something, right?
I like it.
So
It
that's
was
where the very-
Saginaw, yeah.
And that's where the very first meeting was.
Yeah.
So I was involved in that.
Our version of why we were going there was wildly different.
Right. And that's what I...
And the Tom and Pat were going to have breakfast. But it was the
Right.
same meeting.
It was the same meeting.
Yeah.
It was the same date.
And so what were your takeaways from that? And so you are still at Detroit Brew Factory at that date.
Oh, yeah, I'm at Detroit Brew Factory. And we have the first meeting in...
And did Sandy go as well?
Sandy and I went.
Yeah,
Sandy and I
okay,
drove up
cool.
there. So Sandy and I were at the very first meeting, I guess you would have called it. But I don't think it was... I don't know what it was at that time.
Yeah.
But it went really well. You know, I think it was just nice to get together and see such an interesting group of people and hear how a lot of people were very passionate. And at the same time, everyone still liked to have a little bit of fun.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew something would probably come out of that first meeting, you know, and some real smart people actually took control of that meeting much more than Tom and I would have at a Stomp Tish. Some people had real agendas and some real things on their mind, like I did as well. But there were some pretty smart people up there who kind of guided us. Myself, right away, I would have been like, we need to change these laws for distribution. We need to do it now. And there were some people with some patience and who had been through some, you know, I guess I was 30 at the time, but there's some people who are like, hey, hold on, you know, let's make friends first. Let's establish ourselves.
Yeah.
Which seems like that was the best call we ever had for the Guild. I think that meeting, no matter what, I think we decided to promote Michigan beer is what we were going to do.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuck through till this day, I believe.
And from there, we started the first beer festival. And
The beer festival happened from that, correct?
And I know that you got significantly involved in the coordination of festivals at some point, but I don't think it was the first one. So
No.
so
I was
can you-
there, obviously.
Can you
Oh.
share the arc of your summer beer festival experience?
Yeah. And let me first say, I think the festival, the Guild owes a lot of gratitude to Sandy and I believe to Drew and Mike and possibly Bells and some other people I know and Big Buck.
Leonardo's.
And Big Buck.
Yeah.
Because a lot of owners at the time allowed a lot of brewers to come there on company time and put in a serious amount of work for the Guild.
Yep.
You know, at the time, we all paid for hotel rooms and it was all like a deal. So I kind of started the first one there. I was there quite a bit. I helped John out. John was there in the first. So I think I was John's right-hand man because we had known each other from being in the city. And I helped out at those ones. And that was at Green Meat. I think I helped out at the second one.
What did
And I think the third one, by the third one, I was on the board. I got elected to the board. And I think all I said was, and at the time, I believe my position on the board was festival guy, right?
Yeah.
I think the election was at Larry's place, the Eccentric.
Yep.
And I think I just stood up and said, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing because Leonardus don't want to do it anymore. And John was like, amen, or something, right? And so I think that's how it happened. So I stuck around for, I stuck around on the board for a few years. And then I was pretty busy because at the time I'd already moved breweries. I had working with my godmother I love, but I wasn't getting paid, unfortunately. So Drew Sjoer offered me a job as an assistant brewer at Rochester, and that turned into a good job where I ran Drew and Mike's breweries for years. But I just started working the festivals. Oh, and I stayed there for quite a while. And I think I still ran the festivals after I was off the board for a few years. And it was a tremendous amount of work.
And I wonder how you could describe the changing scene, because you went from going to help your aunt out with a handful of breweries in the state to meeting them and being inspired by them to being at this gathering to now you're hustling kegs and coordinating festival for, I don't remember how many breweries we had for the first two, but I mean we're 30 and then 60 in the state, and I think the festivals by the third or fourth we had roughly 40 breweries pouring beer. Is at least a ballpark. So like that's a remarkable amount of change in
It
in
was
a community, and
it grew
you were
quickly.
watching it at the sort of the same length of your career. So what did that feel like?
Well, it was amazing what happened from the first festival, where I think we had more volunteers than we had maybe attendees. It might be possible.
Maybe.
Close. So we learned how to streamline. We learned how to do all this. And I was extremely busy because at the time we were still trying to figure out how to get brew pubs to the beer festival. How do we get that beer there? So I actually was kind of lucky where I had guys like Ron Jeffries, and I had a lot of brewers who would come to Sandy's facility, and we do a contract brew for them out of the one barrel. So they'd actually come to our place, we'd brew a couple one barrels, and they would take that beer to the festival. So actually going through all the steps of now we're a nonprofit, and how do we get the beers there? How do we get variances? Well, we do that by keep making friends. You know what I mean? Like we had done since the day one. I really look at it now, when I kind of left, and I truly believe I probably could have stayed around a little longer, maybe on the board and worked the festival a little longer. But I truly believe, and there was younger guys and really cool, smart people coming up. I thought, new blood to me was always something kind of cool. As long as everyone gave me my respect when I walked around years later, right? But new blood.
It may have
new
taken
ideas.
me a little while, but hopefully I got there.
No, but thank God, I got busy. My breweries were doing great at the time. I mean, I had to step away and take care of, my businesses, you know what I mean?
So what was that like? So your shift to, a group with a couple of breweries and your volume had to change, your customer feedback loop had to change. How was that shifting into kind of growing up as a brewer, I imagine?
Well, I liked it. I look back as being a brewer, and I still make beer now. I'm still involved in beer and in the industry in a lot of different ways now. But making beer to me was hard work. It reminded me a lot of when I worked with those kids. It was real physical. But I used to do brick and cement work, and beer to me was a lot like that. I mean, it was hard work. I mean, physically hard at the time, making those barrels. And the brewers to me were hard workers. And at the same time, you're working hard and you're trying to figure out how to sell beer. And you're trying to be a businessman and a salesman and try to be a brand new HR person. Oh my God, like I said, I know a lot of places where like we need to expand our tap room. We need to put food in there. And all of a sudden people are restaurateurs. So, it's amazing how everyone grew. And some people have grown amazing what they've done for restaurants and breweries and distribution throughout the world. I mean, we're talking, if you look back at the founders, guys, I mean, you look at the story of Dirty Bastard. I always want to say Old Dirty Bastard, but you look at Dirty Bastard to now, it's quite amazing, you know what I mean? And, sometimes I look at some of the brew pubs like Arbor Brewing Company, Matt and Renee were here. A place that can be that awesome and that consistent for that long is unbelievable, whether it has a brewery connected to it or not. So I think it's really amazing. I think it's amazing how we started with the small group of us to, I don't know if there's a better guild in the country. I would be hard pressed if there is one, you know what I mean?
And what do you think are the components that make you feel that way about it? What are the other things besides throwing a party and besides having a lot of great breweries? Like, well, what are your characteristics of a great guild that we have?
Well, a couple things. And I think first and foremost, I think we nailed our first idea was to promote Michigan beer. Look at the amount of breweries and look at Michigan beer and where we stand in the world of beer is pretty remarkable. Mm-hmm. I find the rise of it just amazing. You know what I mean? At the same time, still with a lot of challenges like we had in day one. How do we keep growing? How do we continue this growth? And I guess, through the Guild, it's amazing. And we took our patience. Our economic impact in the state is something I think is amazing. And I'm glad I'm a part of it. I don't know the exact number, but I know there's people who have TV shows, have export company, they have businesses connected to our businesses. And it's people who make bottle caps and T-shirts. There's servers who make really good money at brew pubs. There's cooks who work for really good people. I mean, what we've done is we've done a lot for Michigan beer, not even just even the flavor of beer, but hopefully like we're a good industry. It's satisfying. It's cool when I see, and I said, I want my, you kind of joke about if you started it, like if you're the old guy in the picture at the fraternity. But it's really cool to see younger people, I should say, who have businesses or who are in the business I'm at, and they're doing very well. And they've learned from us how to do it. I guess so, right? They had to in some way have walked in our footsteps, and we made those footsteps a little softer for them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And what what would you wish for them to know, or what do you think would be helpful for them to take a moment to be aware of in order to take advantage of that opportunity? Or
Never let your quality slip, and take care of your HR, take care of the people who work for you. If you can do that, you're pretty good. In my opinion.
Yeah.
Take care of your quality, take care of the people who work for you. And then if you do those things, your guests are going to be fine. They're going to be great. Your guests, as far as in your tap room or they take your beer home and sit, you've taken care of them as well if you're taking care of those things. You know what I mean?
And what about, so your story about reaching out to Tom and Scott, it's the community looks a little different today in terms of number of people and maybe the intensity of all that. But how would you encourage somebody to pick up the phone and call their neighbor brewery? What's important about that now?
Well, when I'm in the business now, when I'm in now, I tend to still call the same people I called in 1997.
Right.
I would imagine it's hard to call here, but I didn't just call people in Michigan. I remember one day I called the head brewer at Sierra Nevada, and the guy picked the phone up. You know what I mean? But back then it was a little bit more critical because there was no Google. Someone wants to know how to make a sour beer or they want to do something, you literally type that in a search engine. My search engine and our search engine back then was reaching out and talking to someone. Hey, can I get some yeast from you? Someone said you make one of them fuzzy German beers and you got some of that crazy smelly yeast. Can I come and get some from you?
Yeah.
Absolutely. We realized back then, and maybe it has changed now because I don't know how much our share of the market in Michigan has grown. Well, I guess I should say this way. Why the same amount of the beer consumed in Michigan made by Michigan breweries hasn't grown as much as the amount of breweries that have opened, right?
Yeah.
So back then, there was no way, even my little brewery or Atwater or Arcadia, we weren't competitors against each other ever back then because the amount of beer we sold was laughable. My competitor was the big boys, right? That's who we went at. That's who we had to go for. So we shared everything. We shared knowledge. We shared yeast. We shared a lot of beers together. And we started the guild together. And, we all, at the end of the festival, picked the trash up in our own vehicles and threw it out together. And this is everyone who's in the guild now, who had breweries back then. They were all there at the beginning helping throw trash out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was easier for us to bond then, Because I look around now and I go to the festivals now and there's so many new breweries. I couldn't possibly even know where to pick up to make a call. Maybe if you know them through your distributor or you met them at a festival.
Your neighborhood or community.
But we really reached out because we would ask about, Zomnagels. We were talking about real
Knuten valves.
Yeah, Knuten, Johnson valve. You know the deal. So there was a need for us to be closer then. I think the need now is, there's a lot more information out there on how to start a brewery or how to do this or how to, and then really it was stuff what to do in the brew house.
And how did having those bonds and those relationships, how did it change your outlook on your career, the industry, the market?
Well, I wouldn't have been doing it. If Scott and Tom didn't pick up the phone, I can't even, if things didn't happen the way they did with the guild, I can't even say I would have been doing that forever.
Yeah.
I would have met Drew and Mike. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have got a job there and it wouldn't have gone on. So it was integral for me personally, but we wouldn't have survived if people were not good people who wanted to share information and share good times and share their failures. You and I know a lot of people who failed, like really good people.
Yeah.
Who were right there with us. Like, why didn't Jim Roffey make it? Was there a better dude making better beer?
Yeah.
I don't think so. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He just that banknote just got to him too fast. You know what I mean?
That's true.
And some people made it, because my Aunt Sandy, I don't know what she did with those books, but
made it work.
Somehow there'd be another jug of grain or malt coming in. So, I don't know. It's just different now. The information highway changes it quite a bit.
So I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the great wedding guild collaboration shindig of some year. I don't know what year, but our Ypsilanti after party,
the Marriott Inn parties.
I don't want to spoil the story, but so can you walk me through the beginning part that ended with you in a ripped shirt heading up the elevator?
I think it ended with you much later playing piano
Yeah, well, I'll share
When
my part.
Ypsilanti's okay.
I'll
all
share
right.
my part. We're talking about your part right now.
Well, why is this an ongoing issue? Because once
No,
again,
no, I just want to hear the story.
Oh,
I'm like,
okay,
I got a camera rolling. This is the time.
Okay, well,
This is time to ask Scanlon to tell the story of the wedding party at
Okay,
the
well-
Ypsilanti Marriott.
it would be me. Of course, I got there a little later because I was working later and harder than everyone else.
That's right.
I was still at the guild site, probably picking up cups.
That's right.
So I get back to the party a tiny bit later, and Dave from Founders,
And our tradition is to party in the lobby of the Marriott.
yeah,
After their bars close, we're basically partying with
Coolers.
coolers.
Yeah, we got
beer.
coolers.
So we don't bother people in the rooms. Just to help
so we're
set
there. Yeah, and there's another, obviously a beautiful looking wedding party. They just had a joyous day. It was a great day for them. Good day for us. I think it was nice weather. I think it was a beautiful day all around. And Dave, being a huge gentle giant, right, one of the greatest people you ever met, reached in this cooler and just grabbed a beer. Well, I believe it was the best man who took offense to that.
Because it wasn't our cooler. It wasn't one of
It
our
wasn't
coolers.
our cooler.
We
It
have
was
coolers all over the place, full of
everywhere.
beer,
Everyone's got beers.
but it was the wedding party's cooler.
And it might have been a Bud Light or something like that. And
Yeah.
I don't think Dave really cared. It was cold beer. It was in a cooler. And the guy got really upset with Dave and wanted to have a fight with Dave. And he said something about the word, and Dave said something about my and something like that. And the guy took offense to it. So, and I can't remember Dave's quote, but it was beautiful. But I know those words were in there. And I was like, that's pretty kick-ass. Then, of course, Scott King, who will back, and I think it was clear Dave was going to get in a fight with the best man, or the best man was going to fight Dave. So Scott King, being one of the most level-headed people we've all ever met,
Absolutely.
in control of his emotions at all times, gets in the middle of it, right? He gets in the middle of it, and this guy just hauls back and is throwing a punch at King.
Uh-huh.
That's where I intervened and grabbed the punch. And with my old job, I wasn't fighting this man. I was therapeutically controlling him physically. Well, all I know is a little chaos ensued from there, and the mother of the bride ended up on my back and ripped the shirt off my body. And pretty much from then on, it was a Jerry Springer scene, right? I guess you would say it was on. And I remember it was on, and everyone was all kind of freaked out. And I don't remember punches per se being thrown, except for the one that tried to go.
Yeah.
So it was pretty chaotic, and I had to run out of there for other reasons, immigration reasons. I had other things I had to take care of at the time if the police were coming. I had things to do, and so I kind of got out of there.
Yeah.
And I came back down, and you were talking to, you can probably take it from, that's my...
Well, my version is, so I was also coming in late because you had left early after you were done picking things up.
Right?
So I think
You were counting money.
I was even another later crew, yeah.
Right?
And it was unusual because we were used to having the lobby to ourselves, and so we were adjacent. Some of us were in this overflow sort of wing outside of the bar by the front foyer. So we had kind of a vantage point. So this whole thing goes down, and then you kind of, long hair,
My hair?
beard, open buttonless shirt.
Oh, for sure.
You go up in the elevator like Beard Jesus, and then I'm a peacemaker, and I got involved to make peace.
I saw you, you're right, yeah.
And I talked to hotel management. I'm like, we're good. So I'm making peace, and I'm also the guy who booked the hotel. So like, I got the whole house account in, like, in play.
Yeah.
And I believe I'm establishing everything's fine. And they said, well, if it's not, we're going to call the police. Okay. So we go back. We think everything's fine, and then the police show up anyway. So apparently they'd already been called. And one of these guys is like the Reno 911, like leather biker gloves, like, or just like super tight uniform. I mean, it's just like looking for a reason. Mm-hmm. And so they come over to us and give us this stern warning about if they have to come back, people are going to go to jail and this and that. And like, they were really lecturing us. And I wanted to interject. And I simply said, well, I understand, officer. I just hope you're giving this same stern warning to the wedding party over there who actually initiated this problem. And he just looked at me and said, "You want to be first?" And I didn't look back at the crowd. I didn't say a word. I walked to the elevator.
And you were gone.
And was gone. I followed the way Scanlon said, "I think I got to go to bed about
see how
arrested."
stories change. My story of you that evening
Oh, it could be accurate.
was different.
Uh-oh.
My story was the cops showed up later again.
Yeah.
And you were holding court at the piano in the lobby.
That had to be a different festival.
I believe it. I thought it was that night. My story was the police talked to you and you were like playing piano while you were talking to them. That was my so my whole life ever
I'm
since
not
that
in a
party.
position to refute that.
Well, because I envisioned that night of that party, you like playing a couple soft tunes, talking to the cops.
Would have mellowed him out. He could have used a little piano music.
Yeah, that was good. I don't remember the fight. I remember there was chaos for a little while there. And the mother of the bride scratched me.
The fact that your shirt was torn off by the mother of the bride is one of
my hair was long then and out of the pony.
Favorite parts of my whole career.
I saw her the next morning too.
Did you?
Oh yeah, we did the whole.
Did you roll over and just say hello, good morning?
No, we did like the whole out of the elevator, kind of look at each other. Yeah, but he was real pissed, and I remember Dave's like, "We all own breweries. We've got 1,000 beers. We'll give you all the beer you ever want." And this guy wasn't having it. He wasn't having it.
Well, I appreciate that diversion into a different kind of story time.
That's a good story because we both know there's many others that we aren't prime time.
So, what do you root for now in today's beer community? You've watched a enormous shift since you started, and things are still moving along, and breweries are opening and growing, and what do you hope for? What do you hope is next?
Well, stability, a much better product. You know what I mean? God, the future Michigan beer. Continue, to make stronger beers. You know what I mean? Keep jobs for people in the community. God, I had something really good I was going to say about the beer and the people, but I guess when I look at it, I guess really, all of that aside, I look more at the Michigan Brewers Guild and where I want the Michigan Brewers Guild to go.
Roll.
Because as a guild, I think we started in the best idea we could have had, and the only thing that came to us, of course, were the festivals, revenue stream, money. So I would like us to be a little bit more diverse, not even on the festivals in their own right, but how we can become more of a service to our members. Is that through bulk buying? Is that through a keg alliance, where the Michigan Brewers Guild has their own kegs? Of course, I don't know if these can be actually worked out. There's numbers, but I would like to explore these opportunities for bulk buying for Guild, for kegs for Guild members, for the Michigan Brewers Guild to maybe have a lab at the services where members can, maybe we don't own the lab, but we have a partnership with the lab. More services for the breweries, grow with this huge growing industry. I don't think we can forever do beer festivals, even though we do them best. There's brew festivals all the time now. You know what I mean? And I think we're losing that critical market share. Do we keep trying to go at the festivals and get, a better band? You know what I mean? I won't say anything. But you try and get a better band to get those extra 3,000 people, to sell those tickets, and they're not really there for the beer. Do we get them to like the beer? I don't think that's the way to go. For members to keep joining, I think there has to be more benefits than beer festivals and a one-time-a-year party. The technical end at the I know we have in Kalamazoo, and I think we move once in a while. The winter conference. I mean, it's amazing. And the last couple ones I've been to, where we've come, I imagine our first one was in Amway in Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
Remember what that was like?
And then Park Place in Traverse City.
Yeah, but look where we've come.
Yeah.
We stayed the path. You know what I mean? And, the conferences are unbelievable for technical stuff, for brewers, for resources. At this point now, I think we should try and take that next step up. If we have enough breweries now where breweries take a bigger financial, a membership.
Yeah.
So we can do more for the breweries.
And what do you think a brewer can do to get the most out of their membership and engagement with the guild right now?
Go to festivals that you think are going to help your brewery or your brew pub. Is it in an area? Does it work well for you? Do you like to go just to have fun so there's more beers there? So continue, to go to the festivals. But I'm sorry, what was that question? I looked at it.
How can a brewery make the most out of their membership? How
I
can
think
they engage? And
the Winter Conference is really turned out to be, I think, one of the premier conferences. Just the technicals, some of the technicals, and how we get better. Sustainability has blown me away the last few years.
Yeah.
So I think the conferences alone. What do the guild members pay now? It's still
Well, they have one complimentary pass for every membership.
no. But what is even a membership for the guild now?
I think it's like $250.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Right.
If it's more, if I can find out.
So whatever it is, I think they have to, and just for any brewery to just get to, and actually, like we talked about earlier, get to know other brewers, and then you can get together on that one-on-one or talk. But the conferences are pretty good. You know what I mean? I think they're pretty amazing. So, and the legislative issues, if you have real legislative issues as well, that you like bring forward, or have a political action committee maybe who works for us, it's not a bad thing either, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thanks for everything you've done for our crazy little world. It's been great sharing it with you over the years. And
I'm excited to see the next 20. I mean,
thanks for sitting with me, man.
Right on, Fred. Cool.
Good stuff. Thanks for listening and sharing while supporting Michigan breweries and craft beer everywhere. The Michigan Brewers Guild was formed in 1997 with its first summer beer festival taking place in July of 1998. Its now 5 annual festivals are dedicated exclusively to Michigan beer brewed by more than 270 member breweries. The Michigan Brewers Guild exists to promote and protect the passionate Michigan beer industry in every way possible. To learn more, visit us at mibeer.com or say hello on one of our social media pages, as we love hearing from you. From coast to coast, from far and near, let's drink Michigan beer.